Galactic Civilizations IV has changed a lot consistently over time. With my thanks to Stardock for sponsoring this video, let's take a look at just how the game has changed and how it plays now. You can check out Galactic Civilizations IV using my link down below. I'm going to use this opportunity to do two things at once. Firstly, reflect on Gal Civ 4, how it has changed over time, some of the big key features and updates, but more importantly, that will help to shape the second part, how it actually plays right now. Some of the key things that separate Gal Civ 4 from the rest, as well as some of my favorite features or changes. Let's start by really setting the boundary here. My look at Gal Civ 4 properly began, and I've focused on it on and off ever since, around the time of the Supernova Edition launching on Steam in October of 2023, to mostly positive reviews and reviews that have since trended even more towards that sweet light of positivity. Speaking of positivity, one of my favorite changes and features that I still use every time I start up the game and try and use it each time is Alien GPT. That integration of a civilization builder, a custom Civ builder, with these AI ChatGPT empowered functions. You put in a little prompt and Alien GPT does the rest, if you're unfamiliar. It will essentially take a little nothing burger of a sentence and create a civilization out of it. It's not perfect, it does not get every single thing right, but image integration feature, which is occasionally imperfect, however generally does a pretty good job. And this helps to create what is, overall, I believe, a very good civilization builder and customizer. Alien GPT rolled out in March of 2024 alongside some other key updates, moving populations around, and a continued focus on quality of life, those sort of small incremental improvements which it has continued to see. However, it would not be until a few months later that probably my favorite both free update as well as the accompanying paid DLC expansion were to release, and that's Warlords. My personal winner of the best update / expansion of the year award, absolutely, because it really helps to reshape warfare in the game. It helps to pin it better within diplomacy, and ultimately it feels a little bit more impactful by setting those 4 key boundaries on how you declare a war. How ambitious will you be? Is it defensive? Is it about conquest? Is it about all-out extermination? You set those options, and they of course set the ultimate parameter of the war. It's not just a surface level thing. How long the war can carry on for until you start to not just face the diplomatic penalty of the entirety of the rest of the galaxy looking down upon you, but also some real penalties to things like manufacturing, to your production, empire-wide negative penalties from that sort of wariness of being at war for too long, of not sticking to your intentions and your aims. Not just that framing, but the broader things that were introduced here alongside the war aims, combat doctrines, different evasion tactics, and some of the free changes as well, like further expansion to the technology tree, for example, broader changes to the battle viewer. The overall Warlords DLC and free update really helped to, I believe, reshape Gal Civ 4 in the right direction. It helped to reframe combat to make it feel a little bit more significant. And that, I think, was very important, because the broader game, take the ship customization, for example. On the one hand, just aesthetic, and deeply aesthetic. So many options. You could waste away hours in here in something that can feel a little overwhelming at first. On the other hand, there's those more tactical changes. The ship upgrades, retrofitting for combat, equipping better equipment, better technologies that you've unlocked. And of course, all of this has changed, sometimes subtly, sometimes a little more drastically, as Galactic Civilizations IV has evolved. Back to the initial point about Warlords though, with this deep, rich ship customization, we now have a much better warfare and diplomatic system around it. It's helped to bring those two in line with one another, so it doesn't just suit the sort of combat-readied, more Warlord-like 4X strategy gamer like me, but it also helps to build a broader picture, one of diplomacy and ramifications for those who stay at war for too long, who don't stick to their initial aim, as well as, of course, all of the sweet options for invading worlds, for example, how aggressive you may be when you choose to actually jump in. How will you send your troops in? Will you just bombard this planet with some ungodly weapon of awesome destruction? Or will you take a more tactical approach to try and preserve the planet, at least what may be left of it? Overall, the two systems are now much more aligned with one another, and I think they help to shape a much more cohesive game in Galciv 4. I also reflect briefly on some of the stuff that has come in earlier free updates in the later part of 2024, like I think the Starview update, the Taxonomy update. We're talking about different things that have helped, like the shipyards, for example. In the main menu, you can customize away to your heart's content, but while you're in-game, it will now limit you, so you can't just add every single thing that you may not have unlocked, you may not have enough of it available, enough of the specific resource, weapon, technology, whatever it may be, right? There are sensible changes to help ensure that sometimes dumb players like me don't make sometimes dumb decisions without realizing that we've made them, those quality of life improvements, alongside the aesthetic ones. One that I would note in particular is now, as we use that aforementioned fantastic civilization customizer, the colors that you choose for your civilization overall will be reflected in the UI, the borders around the edges of the game. It's nice little things like that to help to build a more cohesive story. Speaking of story, of course, Galactic Civilizations IV is known for its very wide range of events. That too has seen significant improvement, expansion over time, a lot of it free, and of course other parts of it tied in with paid DLC, specific stories for that DLC. Though a lot of these tales are, as I mentioned, generally included inside of the free updates. Speaking of those updates, there was of course one other massive one, personally for me, as well as overall how it's contributed to the game alongside Warlords, and that was the Megastructures. More focused perhaps around the late game, this DLC helps to do something that 4X games can often struggle with, and that's keeping the late game interesting. Massive structures, better ability to harness perhaps worlds, and obviously stars at the center of them that may not have been a focus earlier on. Of course, all of this is powered by Gigamass, and you'll need to race to harvest Gigamass from dead worlds inside of what at times can be a massively overwhelming system in Galciv 4, and at other times actually a fairly small and manageable one. It is of course entirely up to you how you set up your game. If you're a regular viewer here on my channel, you will obviously know that I prefer the slightly smaller worlds, the faster paced 4X gameplay. And thankfully, Galciv does a good job at managing that while keeping the late game interesting with the Megastructures DLC. The rest of the expansion to the game since the Supernova release has been generally smaller stuff. A species pack, Tales-focused DLC, starting with another one coming, I believe, in 2025, early 2025. These options are likely best suited to earnest fans, expanding the broader universe and storytelling by introducing things like additional species, for example. I believe that Warlords and Megastructures, the two core DLCs that have helped to shape the game, have generally done a very good job at improving Galactic Civilizations IV this year. And that broader DLC expansion pack helps to expand the universe. Of course it does. But those two core DLC packs really do a great job at building on the Supernova edition. And this edition of the game obviously still has things it needs to build on. Don't get me wrong, it is not yet a complete, and perfected game. There are still some bugs to be ironed out, issues, and more content to be released. Thankfully, and one of the reasons why I like working with Galactic Civilizations IV, working on videos about the game, is that it's clearly a game that continues to receive love and support. It hasn't been dropped, They're still updating it, they're still passionately working on it, dev diaries all the time, constant community feedback, and that makes me really happy to see. Thank you very much for joining me in this look at how Galactic Civilizations IV is playing now, based on the improvements and updates that we've seen since the release of that Supernova edition. Again, if you'd like to check out Galactic Civilizations IV, you can do so using my link down in the description below. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you next time.